Hello and welcome everyone, it is me the lover, also known as the Power To-Do List, back for you with another deck profile. I hope you all made it safely into the new years and we are starting the new years off with a deck profile. I have been very excited to show you guys because I've been excited to finally be able to play this deck in a pure fashion. Solfachord, they're getting a new Link monster, which is pretty cool and I think enables a pretty neat kind of mid-range-esque playstyle that I will be highlighting in this deck profile. To start off, these are Pendulum monsters, but usually some of their pen scale effects are shared. Your low scales from 1 to 4 prevent your opponent from activating spell, trap, or monster effects when you are Pendulum summoning Solfachord monsters, so no torrential tribute on your Pendulum summon. And your high scales, your 5s to 8s, prevent your Pendulum summons of Solfachord Pendulum monsters from being negated, so no strike or judgment there. But what do these Solfachord monsters on their own do? Well, starting off with the tallest one in town, Solfachord Coolia. You can special summon her by attributing 2 Pendulum monsters you control. Pretty neat. It won't come up much, but her second effect is pretty damn crazy. That's why, you are limited to only using each of them once per turn. You can target a face-up card your opponent controls or up to 2 if you have an odd Pendulum scale in your Pendulum zone and negate their effects until the end of your opponent's turn, which is pretty cool. And when the effect of a monster on the field is activated with an equal or lower attack than your highest Pendulum scale in your Pendulum zone times 300, you can quick effect destroy that monster. The first effect would probably be something where a lot of people would have been like, damn, this should have been the quick effect. But I think a quick effect pop nonetheless is pretty nice, and the first effect can help you a lot when you are going second. Not only because Coolia is a pretty big body, but also because, negating 2 cards can be pretty good. Then we have Solfachord Beauty next in line. She can, quick effect, target an effect monster your opponent controls, or if you have an even Pendulum scale in your Pendulum zone, you can even target a face-up spell or trap your opponent controls. And this turn, it is banished when it leaves the field, which is pretty underwhelming. Her second effect basically turns her into a somewhat kinda construct. If she battles an opponent's monster with an equal or higher attack than the lowest Pendulum scale in your Pendulum zone, times 300, you will destroy that monster at the start of the damage step. Pretty neat, helps her get over some tough bodies. But yeah, moving on to Angelia here. If you have an odd Pendulum scale in your Pendulum zone, if your Solfachord monster attacks, your opponent cannot activate spell or trap cards. All their effects until the end of the damage step, so basically turns your whole archetype into ancient gear monsters. But you can see that most of these effects are tied to having either an odd or an even scale in your Pendulum zone. And then during your main phase, you are able to tribute a Solfachord Pendulum monster, even if face down. And if you do, you special summon a Solfachord Pendulum monster from your deck, whose scale is either too higher or too lower to that monster, kind of allowing you to tutor through your monster lineup and maybe trigger some of the on-summon search effects, similar to the one of the next one, Solfachord Gracia. When you have an even Pendulum scale in your Pendulum zone, if your Solfachord Pendulum monster attacks, your opponent cannot activate monster effects until the end of the damage step, so no honest, I guess, which is nice. And if she is summoned, she is able to add you a Solfachord spell or trap from your deck to your hand. Some of those are very powerful, and you will be trying to get to those. Then we have Fast Solfachord Fancier. This one doesn't change from the OCG name. While you have an odd Pendulum scale in your Pendulum zone, if your Solfachord Pendulum monster would be destroyed by battle, you can destroy her instead. And during your main phase, simple enough, you can add a Solfachord Pendulum monster from your deck to your face-up extra deck, except herself. Pretty neat effect, gives you some additional setup for your Pendulum summons, and also, more ways to, get to key names in your archetype. Then we have Solfachord Elitea here. If you have an even Pendulum scale in your Pendulum zone, you take no damage from battles involving your Solfachord Pendulums, which is kind of neat. And if she is summoned, you can target a spell or trap your opponent controls and return that target to the hand. In archetype, spell and trap removal is, I think, always appreciated, even in a post-Mystic Mine time. Then we have Solfachord Deremia. While you have an odd Pendulum scale in your Pendulum zone, if a Solfachord Pendulum monster card would be destroyed by an opponent's card effect, you can destroy her instead of one of those cards. And if you control a Solfachord in your Pendulum zone, you can special summon her from your hand, which is the second and more important effect on her, because she, in combination with the next card, is an easy way to beyond the Pendulum. Though Solfachord QDR is able to, you know, buff your Solfachods by attack times 100, equal to their own pendulum scale if you have an even pendulum scale down there. And if she is normal or special summoned, you are able to add a Solfachord pendulum monster from your deck to your hand, which is pretty nice. In most cases, you know, you will be adding Dreamia, as she is a pretty good extender if you have another name to beyond the pendulum. Then we have like some hand traps. These are fairies, so Herald of Orange Light is pretty good. Then we have 3 copies of Ash Blossom, you know, just another good staple. And then we get into the field spell, which I think is pretty sick, not gonna lie. This field spell has 3 effects. You can only use each effect once per turn. You are able to either add a face-up Solfachord Pendulum monster from your extra deck to your hand, increase the pendulum scale of one of your Solfachord monsters in your pendulum zone by its level for this turn only, or if you control Solfachord Pendulum monsters with at least 3 different even scales or 3 different odd scales, you can destroy a card your opponent controls. Last one's a bit hard to set up. Second one helps you pen summon a Coolia if you really need to, or just, you know, adjust pen scale levels, which is kind of nice. And the first one is pretty sick because getting to add back, you know, a QDR each turn to give you value is kind of nice, and you know, gives this deck a really good grind game, honestly, that you usually expect from a Pendulum archetype. Then we are playing 1 Terraforming to get to that field spell, and then we are looking at probably the most like single most insane support card a Pendulum deck has received in a long time. Solfachord Elegance. This also has 3 effects, and you're able to activate 1 per turn. You can either, you know, place a Solfachord Pendulum monster from your deck into your Pendulum zone. Simple enough, kind of nice. And then the second effect comes in. You add a Solfachord Pendulum monster from your hand to the extra deck face up, and then you can set scales from your deck. Yeah, kind of crazy. Very crazy card. That second effect gives you a lot of tempo and an easy way to set up Pendulum scales with very, very minimal investment, which is really crazy. You will in a lot of cases just be activating this card for that effect in your initial turns. The last effect is also pretty neat. You can, you know, add 2 cards in odd and an even scale from your Pendulum zones to your face-up extra deck and then draw 2. Kind of neat on a follow-up, maybe to give you some additional steam. But in a lot of cases, you know, that second effect is king. 3 copies of Small World, since all of these have different levels and a lot of different attributes, but the one thing they all share in common is that they are all fairies. You have easy ways from basically any name to QDR, which is your main normal summon. Do not try to, you know, really change that. Then we have 3 Impermaneered, you know, the helps going seconds, just another good hand trap. And then closing off the main deck is a copy of Solfachord Musician. This is basically if you have an even and an odd pendulum scale, a targeted pop, something you can maybe add off of a Gracia to increase your end board's kind of ceiling. But nothing I would, you know, call mandatory in the deck. I think you could also just like play another hand trap here. Maybe shave a Small World if you want to add like another. The extra deck, Abyss Dweller is pretty straightforward. Underworld Goddess is a mommy. Access Code Toggle, another pretty straightforward card, similar to Apollosa. And then we're talking about the 1 card that makes this deck a good bit playable on its own. I'm maxing out on this because, you know, it gives you access to more copies on a follow-up because you don't have many ways to recycle. This takes 2+ monsters, including a Pendulum monster, gains 100 attack for each face-up Pendulum monster in your extra deck, and the activated effects of Pendulum monsters she points to cannot be negated, which is pretty cool. And once per turn, when your opponent activates a card or effect, you can quick effect special summon a Solfachord card with an odd pendulum scale from your Pendulum zone to a zone she points to, and then add a Solfachord Pendulum monster with an even scale from your deck to your hand, to your extra deck face up. In the process, you are also negating that activation. So, you know, she does a lot. Also, you know, pulls out Coolia from your scale to give you another quick effect pop, which is pretty nice. Sets up your extra deck for the next turn and negates a card. So, you know, she kind of does everything, which is pretty crazy. Also becomes pretty sizable. 2,700 on her own is already nice. But usually after, you know, initial setups, she will be around 3k, which is pretty damn good. Nightmare Unicorn, Nightmare Phoenix, and a Cerberus here for removal. And then we have 2 copies of Grand Solfachord Musician. Takes 2 Pendulums, and during your main phase, you are able to add a Pendulum monster from your hand to the extra deck face up, and 1 face-up Pendulum monster from your extra deck to your hand, as long as one of them has an even scale, one of them has an odd scale. And when you Pendulum summon a Solfachord monsters, you can target one of those and add a Solfachord Pendulum monster from your deck to your hand, whose level equals the Pendulum scale of that monster. So, you know, gives you some additional setup, but in a lot of cases you will be making this. The card they gave us because they are too lazy to unban Electromite. Takes 2 effect monsters, including a Pendulum monster. If this is link summoned from in the extra monster zone, you pay 1200 and add a Pendulum monster from your deck to your hand. But for the rest of this turn, unless you Pendulum summon directly afterwards, you cannot activate monster effects, and the effects of your Pendulum scales are negated. Also pretty neat if you pen summon 2 monsters with different original levels, which comes up quite a lot in this deck, since, you know, these all have like individual levels. You can target 2 cards on the field and destroy them, which is pretty nice. So Beyond the Pendulum, pretty crazy card. Your main like choke point for your initial combo, where you are, you know, trying to set up. IP Masquerader is good in, you know, a lot of setups, and a Link Kuriboh to close off the extra deck. Ignore this War Crime of a side deck. I threw this together in like 5 minutes when I, you know, built this deck. This side deck, you know, of course, adjusts this to like whatever you are locally playing against, you know. Play Kaijus for towers, going second stuff for, you know, going second, and back row removal in case you feel like you need it. But with that, I think we'll take a look at a couple of, you know, sample combos and sample test hands, and then I'll send you guys off. All right, and this is, I guess, the bare minimum. QDR plus any in quotation marks. The scale 2 here screws you a bit in this line, but you're only playing 2 of her, and in a lot of cases, you know, yeah. You're going to normal QDR, add the Dreamier as you saw, make Beyond the Pendulum, and complete your scales with that search. Then go ahead, Pendulum summon, and make Kulia. Not a very impressive setup, I do have to say, but this was only with 2 cards out of our hand. If you didn't specifically open Kulia here, in a lot of cases you will be searching her off of Beyond the Pendulum to give you that second layer of disruption after your initial Kulia resolves. Since, you know, she's an Omni Negate and she is a quick effect pop. But with that, we've, you know, made 2 disruptions out of 2 cards, pretty decent, and we still have 3 to work with. But let's look at what we can do when we add an elegance to this. In this example, the Kulia could really be any name, to be honest. In most cases, you will just be, you know, sending that to the extra deck with your elegance. Kulia actively is like the worst name in this case, funnily enough. But we'll take a look at what happens here. We're going to fire the Solfachord Elegance, placing, you know, scales from the deck, putting the Kulia into our extra decks, normal summoning QDR, summoning Dreamier, making Beyond the Pendulum. Beyond the Pendulum adds us a copy of Gracia here. We're going to pend 2 here, and this is the moment where I can actively say, yes, Kulia was the worst one to have in hand here to place into the extra deck, because you are able to actively pen summon 3 here if you have another name in like hand, you know, 2 cards are still blank in your hand, or if, you know, the name you drew was not Kulia, which changes the setup quite a bit. But we're going to let this play out here. We're going to fire the field spell. I use the field spell to add QDR to our hand for the next turn. And once again, we are sitting on Kulia, and, you know, follow-up in this case, which is pretty nice. If we had, like, another name to, you know, pen summon here, we could, you know, turn Dreamier and that name into an IP Masquerader, which is nice, you know, adding an additional layer of disruption by either, you know, making a Nightmare Unicorn on your opponent's turn, or, you know, just straight up making Apollosa, which is also pretty neat. Yeah, so this setup already proves a lot more, you know, potent in terms of the disruption you are, you know, able to put into your opponent's turn, while also giving you consistent access to follow-up, which is very nice. But I think we'll, you know, take a look at another, like, blank test hands and see what we can do with those. And with that, we have drawn our test hand. And this one is looking not too shabby, to be honest. We will go ahead, fire Small World, getting rid of this Coolia in our hand. We can basically use like 99% of these as bridges, except Beautia. We'll go banish a Gracia here. Really, I think doesn't matter a whole bunch what you banish to get to Cutia. Then we'll fire Elegance, place 2. We'll put the Angelia here into our extra deck face up, and we'll scale Coolia Cutia for, you know, maximum range on that Pendulum summon. We will go ahead, normal summon the Cutia here, use her effect to grab us the Doremia I have talked about. Go ahead, use her special summoner, and from there we will turn these two into Pendulum, into Beyond the Pendulum, using the Beyond the Pendulum here to grab us a copy of Gracia. We're trying to, you know, really get to the field spell here to ensure us a bit of follow-up play. Now, you know, as I've talked about in the second test hand I've shown you guys, we can, you know, pen summon 3 here, trigger the Gracia to add us a spell trap to hand, which in basically every case will be the field spell. It's just really nice to be able to, you know, consistently add back a card from the extra deck each turn. We'll put 2 of these into a copy of a Grand Solfachord Coolia. Alternatively, you can make the Iron Masquerader before, you know, committing to Coolia, but I think the benefits of that are like very minuscule. Especially on a, you know, turn 1. Then we are going to fire the Harmonia, add back a Solfachord. In, you know, every case this will be QDR unless we already have like another copy in hand. Because adding another name to hand is just incredibly powerful, especially considering that we can also normal summon her. But with that, we have, you know, reached, I guess, perfection, you know. Sitting on an Omni Negate, a quick effect pop, and the potential to either make Unicorn or Appaloosa is pretty crazy, and I think, you know, offers a good bit of decently varied interaction. On the following turn, we are, you know, able to, you know, normal summon the Cutia, gets another name back into our grip. Not even talking about, you know, that we can already add, you know, another name back into our hand, which, you know, makes us less dependent on, you know, making a link on the follow-up before we commit to our Pendulum summon, as we can, you know, use the resources we have to already put like 2 bodies out of our hand in onto the board. And yeah, we can, you know, potentially also use the Elegance to draw 2 if we really feel like it, but I think that's like something you can do if you already have a good feeling that you're able to go for game. But with that out of the way, I think we'll see each other again in the deck profile shortly and quickly talk about a few final thoughts. In general, what is there to say? I'm excited this deck finally, you know, has kind of got its own teeth, you know. It's nice that the choir finally got its own voice to keep with the music theme. Cutia is a pretty crazy starter, being able to, you know, add Dreamia, which in almost any case makes you Beyond the Pendulum, is just crazy, as Beyond the Pendulum is such an incredibly powerful card for like any Pendulum-based strategy. It's crazy to think that we got this instead of unbanned Electromite, and it basically does the same thing as Electromite. You're trying to get to this as soon as possible. On following turns, Musician is, you know, surprisingly good. As you're able to, you know, get a lot of value out of her, almost considering, like, though, like, she's a bit more situational, as you've probably guessed, so I'm, like, almost considering, like, maybe adding a second copy of Beyond the Pendulum to this deck. Coolia is crazy. Like, Grand Solfachord Coolia is just crazy. Omni Negate, that just puts a quick effect pop on the board, also puts another monster into the extra deck for the next turn, and she just gets big, because, yes, because that's what, you know, what was missing from this entire combination. Overall, this deck has a lot of cool tools. Coolia being a quick effect pop, Beautia being kind of a construct, Angelia kind of tutoring through the whole lineup, Gracia grabbing you spell traps, which are really important for this deck, especially the field spell. Fancier, you know, for additional setup is also pretty nice. Having in-archetype spell and trap removal is always appreciated, I think. and Dreamier and Cutia are a very good duo to easily make you a link to get your plays started. Elegance is also just a crazy card. Yeah, setting scales from the deck is just, it's kind of nuts, you know? But yeah, in general, I am excited for, you know, the new support this deck is getting, and definitely excited to maybe, you know, pilot this at many points in the future as well. But what are your thoughts on Solfachord specifically? Let me down in the comments below. But with all that out of the way, I will thank you guys very much for watching and see you guys again next time. But until then, goodbye.